All right. Good morning, everybody, and happy Earth Day. We are very, very excited here at Birch Aquarium. We have a really special event happening today. We have a special live chat with one of our Birch Aquarium staff members. My name is Delaney. I'm part of our education department, and I'm going to be here today joining all of you and interviewing one of our associate curators, Fern. So we're really happy to have Fern here, and the topic of our live chat today is all about coral conservation. So we're going to spend about 15-20 minutes talking to Fern, asking questions about research behind corals and what Birch Aquarium is doing to support coral conservation. And we will save much time at the end for all of you who are joining us to ask us questions. So some of you are already tuning in to say hello. So make sure you put those questions in that comment section, and we'll save time at the end to dive into those questions. So Fern, thank you for joining us. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you do at the aquarium and what your job is.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Earth Day. So like Delaney mentioned, I'm one of the associate curators, and part of my job is caring for the animals, and part of my job is supervising. So it's a combination of both, but care of the animals is my main job.
So taking care of animals, and I think working in the husbandry team, what does a normal day look like for you, Fern, at the aquarium?
So our mornings start off by looking at all the tanks, looking at all the animals, making sure everybody's healthy. We go around tank by tank, inspecting everybody. Then we check temperatures of every tank. We check to make sure the life support systems, the filters, the pumps are all working. That's really a major and important part of our work.
Yeah, and during this time, most of us, you can see myself and Fern, we're at home during this time, but our husbandry team are essential workers. So they're still the only ones heading into the aquarium every day to make sure that they're taking care of our animals and making sure they're nice and healthy and continuing to thrive even with the aquarium closed right now. So Fern, thanks for taking the time to join us today. And are you ready to dive into coral conservation with us?
Sounds good, yeah.
Okay. So today is Earth Day, and it's a really special day because it's actually the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So why coral conservation on Earth Day? Maybe you can tell us how are the ocean and the earth connected?
The ocean and the earth are very much connected. Our weather is influenced by the ocean. We get food from the ocean. A lot of people's livelihoods around the planet depend on the ocean and on coral reefs. Coral reefs support so much life, and they are so much a part of the economy of so many countries that it's super important. And we get medicine from reefs too. So a super important part of our environment.
Yeah, and right now we have a video playing. It looks like there's some coral reefs here. We've got fish swimming around. Fern, can you maybe tell us a little bit about the video right now and what we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is one of our main coral tanks. It holds about 1,200 gallons. And we have a number of different species of corals in here and fish, mainly from Fiji. For those of you that have been to the Birch Aquarium, this is tank number 26, and it represents an upper reef slope, which is a high energy part of the reef, a lot of sunlight, shallow water, a lot of wave action. So we reproduce these environmental factors in this exhibit with more water flow, good lighting, all those things that these corals need to thrive.
And so this stream here shows us a really brightly colored coral reef. Is there a way that the aquarist team, the husbandry team at Birch Aquarium is able to make these corals kind of come to life with color with our exhibits?
Yeah, so a lot of these corals come with these beautiful colors to begin with. And a lot of it actually is this single-celled algae that lives in the tissue of the coral. And that algae photosynthesizes just like plants on land and provides a lot of food for the corals. And then corals also have these beautiful pigments as well. So you see some blues, purples and pinks, things like that. And so if we keep good water quality, if the water's clean, then these colors come out. And you get to see this beautiful diversity of color in these corals.
Yeah, that's amazing. Seeing all the different colors here, seeing the fish swim around. Very, very bright habitat, definitely. So along with your job of taking care of corals at our aquarium, Fern, I know you have a lot of prior experience in the field. So I understand you have helped with coral research in the Caribbean. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience and what it was like?
So I've had a few really nice opportunities to help or to participate in some coral conservation. One of the highlights was participating in this workshop hosted by this organization called SECOR, and that stands for Sexual Coral Reproduction. So I was able to spend 10 days in Curacao in the Caribbean, about 50, 60 miles north of Venezuela. And we went during the time of coral spawning. There's a certain time of year when these corals spawn, and I participated in that workshop. We collected the spawn of corals and fertilized eggs in the lab and had these baby corals settle out. And what happens is that the following year, another group goes to that same place. And by that time, these corals have grown up a little bit. And those corals are then planted out onto reefs that need some help. So this group, this organization is doing a lot of work in different places around the world. And that was super fun. Another thing that I've participated in and the aquarium participated in some years back is this thing called Coral Reef Ambassadors, where we worked with an aquarium in Taiwan. We collaborated with them. We helped junior high school students in San Diego and Taiwan learn about coral reefs, set up a coral reef aquarium in the classroom. We taught them about coral propagation, conservation, and then we visited Taiwan, and the kids from Taiwan came and visited us, and they presented their life stories, what it's like to live in Taiwan, what it's like to live in San Diego. And then part of the goal was for them to spread the news about coral reefs to their classmates, to their families and communities. So those are two, I think, of the highlights in as far as coral conservation is concerned that I participated in.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's important to point out that, you know, with coral research and the coral conservation project you were involved with includes education. And I think that's a huge piece of it. And today being Earth Day, I think knowing that that research and education piece comes together to share kind of that knowledge with people and to teach others about what they can do to help with coral conservation is really important. I do want to acknowledge we've got a lot of people joining us live right now. Haley Stafford, she said she shares her birthday every year with Earth Day. So happy birthday, Haley. And we've got Donna joining in saying
happy
hello.
Birthday.
And we've got Mary Rose Duke saying happy Earth Day from Nolan and Abigail in Boise, Idaho. So it's really nice to see all of you joining in, even from different parts of the country. We're going to continue on with our questions for our coral expert, Fern. So if you have questions you want to ask Fern at the very end in relation to coral conservation or about the aquarium and what it takes to take care of animals, make sure you guys submit those questions in the comment section right here. So Fern, kind of staying on this question, I want to ask maybe a simple question to you, but maybe this is a question other people might have. And it's simply, what is a coral? I think some people might not know exactly what a coral might be. Is it an animal? Is it a plant? Is it living? Is it non-living?
Yeah, sure. The corals that you're looking at, an example, well, corals are living animals, and they're related to jellyfish, they're related to sea anemones, and maybe looking at those animals, maybe you get a better idea of what a coral is. So they have these tiny polyps, what are called polyps. And the corals we're looking at in the video right now have these tiny polyps. And it's almost like this apartment complex. There are a bunch, hundreds, maybe thousands of these polyps, and they're united in building this carbonate skeleton. So there's this really thin layer of tissue, and underneath it is this skeleton that they're building. And that's what builds the coral reefs. These tiny little animals kind of unified and building these massive structures. Um, and these tiny polyps do have tentacles, and these tentacles are designed to capture food. So as I mentioned before, they do have this single-celled algae that provides a lot of food for them by the process of photosynthesis. But then they have these tiny polyps, and they can catch plankton in the water.
That's amazing. So yeah, looking at this image of corals here, they are moving animals, but they don't move like the typical fish we see moving in this picture. They're moving kind of on a smaller microscopic scale with those little polyps. Awesome. So our next question.
That's right. And
oh, go ahead, Fern.
oh, I was just going to say, since corals are stationary because they have that skeleton, they need water flow. And that water motion or that water flow brings food to them. That's all.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that.
And I'm sure that's an important piece to think about when building an exhibit in a habitat for animals in an aquarium setting. Is it's not just about, okay, we have animals, we have their food, but do they need that water flow? What is the lighting? They need something to attach to that coral skeleton to grow off of. So I'm sure there's a lot that goes into caring for an exhibit like this one. All right, Fern.
Yeah, there is, and we're fortunate that we have natural seawater from the ocean that supplies a lot of our exhibits with natural seawater. But for the coral tanks, we do supplement, and some of our coral exhibits are not getting that flow of seawater 24/7. So the idea is that we want to boost up the level of calcium and the pH a little bit to enhance the ability to deposit gelatin. And so we do a bit more filtration, a bit more water flow, and definitely more lighting to keep these animals thriving.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So diving into talking about conservation of corals, what are some threats that corals face in the wild, in our wild reef populations?
Yeah, so the biggest threat right now is climate change, the warming of ocean water. We know firsthand from caring for these exhibits, if the temperature gets a bit too high, we start seeing this thing called bleaching in our corals. And this is what happens in the wild. It's been happening more frequently over the past couple decades. Then there's the issue of runoff, pollution. Um, these things also impact reefs. But if we can't get a hold of this climate change problem, then it's really hard to bring back these corals, these reefs. So there are a number of threats, but the biggest one right now is the warming of the oceans.
So with climate change being a main threat to coral reefs, we actually want to tune into our live comments here because Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Birch Aquarium plays a really vital role with Scripps Oceanography in communicating the research that goes on and really being a place for the public to come and learn about what scientists are doing out in the field in concerns with our ocean. So they want to know a little bit more about the 100 Island Challenge. Can you talk to us about that exhibit in the aquarium and how does that support coral research with Scripps scientists?
Yeah, so the 100 Island Challenge is really a really neat thing. Scientists at Scripps at the Sandin Lab have developed a method for basically taking 3D images of a certain portion of reef. And then they can go back every couple years or so and take another photograph or image of that same reef. And the images they take um, is pretty exact. So I think down to the centimeter level, they can detect changes. So in this way, they can examine how it's doing, how it's progressing, if it's deteriorating, and this gives a really good measurement, a good view of where the trend is, what's happening with the reef. And the way the Birch Aquarium has helped this group out is by having them come up to the aquarium in one of our tanks, which is entitled the 100 Island Challenge exhibit. They've been able to use this instrument, these cameras in our tank, and it helps calibrate their camera, their equipment, so that when they go out on the field, they have a good idea of the area that they're measuring, because we know the exact measurements, the dimensions of our exhibit, and so that helps the calibration of their exhibit. And so, yeah, they've been able to produce some really cool images of these wild reefs, and then show what happens over the years, and show the changes. And that's really helpful to scientists.
Yeah, definitely. And with our 100 Island Challenge exhibit, for those of you tuning in, if you've never visited Birch Aquarium before, this is an opportunity where our guests get to see Scripps scientists diving in this exhibit. So with that it obviously takes a lot of gear and a lot of training ahead of time. So what does it take to study in the field in a coral reef exhibit, Fern?
So I guess the question is how to study coral reef in the exhibit. Was that the question?
Yes. What
Yeah.
is it to study it?
So I guess yeah. So there are different. We have different scientists that we've helped, that we've collaborated with over the years, and there have been different ways that we've helped. So one is, for example, testing out this camera in an exhibit. So before you go out in the field, you can test out different equipment, make sure it works. And since we have live coral, you can test this out on basically a living system that approximates the wild. And instead of traveling and guessing and thinking maybe it works or it doesn't, you can prove the efficiency, the efficacy of these instruments before you head out. So that's one way we've helped out. So there have been different kinds of instruments that we've allowed in the tanks that don't harm the animals and that help scientists out at the same time.
Yeah,
So I
because
hope that answers the question.
it does. And I think Fern can speak to this, and myself, that sometimes you go out into the field, your equipment might not be working, or it might not go as planned. So as a scientist, you really have to prepare for any obstacle that's going to get thrown at you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Delaney, I
Mhm.
just wanted to also mention some of the other work and the collaboration that we do,
Mhm.
if that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things we do is you can see in this image, this video that's been playing, the corals over the years grow, and they can grow into each other and over each other, and they can sting each other, and some are more powerful than others. Some shade others, and they do need light. So we go in and we trim the corals, and we take these fragments, we save them, we glue them onto little ceramic discs, and these fragments can grow into their own new colonies. They're genetically the same as the mother colony, but they grow into an individual colony. And we've distributed hundreds of these fragments of corals to other public aquariums. But then we've also provided them to scientists at Scripps and at other universities. So again, they can test out a new protocol here right at home before they go out in the field to do their work. So we have this right here, and one of our corals, and I think we have a slide. We'll show some slides in a second. One of our corals has been in like 12 research papers.
Wow.
So in this image on the right, you can see I was trimming corals, and this coral, if we can go, yeah. So I'm trimming corals here, and we save all those little fragments. And then if we go to the next slide, um, there's this large coral that we have. It's in our display tank number 27. If you visit us, maybe you're familiar with it. But this coral originally came in 1995 as a fragment that was about 3 inches long. And from that one fragment, in 1995, we've produced hundreds of fragments for researchers. We've supplied a number of public aquariums with this coral, and we have a bunch of it on reserve. And you'll see a video in a little while of our reserve holding tank with fragments of different corals. But this one's been a superstar for us. It's provided so many institutions with live coral and coral that you don't have to go out in the wild and collect. So it's our little way of helping conservation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece with Birch Aquarium is, what it was Birch Aquarium doing? What is the husbandry team doing to help coral conservation? And what you just described is a really big part of that and that coral propagation. Fern, what are some of the different species of corals that have been unique or challenging in propagating in terms of coral conservation? What have been some challenges, or what are some things that have been new highlights over the years that you've been working on?
So, this process of the fragmentation, it does occur naturally in the wild. Corals do break and because of wave action or because of their own weight. And so aquarists for a number of years, many years now, have been trimming and fragmenting these corals and producing more. And I think the main thing is, having good water quality and having the right conditions. That's something we've learned over the years. But then some years ago, we started seeing that some of our corals started spawning, reproducing naturally, releasing eggs and sperm into our tanks. So that's something that we're kind of looking at more closely. We do fragment our corals, and there's a image of coming up in one of these slides where we show a fragment that's been, we take a cross section and we look for eggs in our corals. And there have been a couple aquariums in London and the Florida Aquarium as well that have been able to successfully reproduce corals this way. And our goal is that we can do the same here one day with our corals. And that's a challenge, but it's definitely worth a goal that we should attain, because we can produce so many more corals that way if we know how to perfect that process. So that's I think where we're headed and where a lot of aquariums are headed now these days.
Yeah,
So I think we'll go one more. Sorry.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
one more slide, maybe one or two more slides. Here we go. So that's the slide I was looking for. So this is a cross section of that same, I believe that same coral we were looking at, the big green one. And if you look inside, those little orange balls or sausage link that you see, those are the eggs of a coral. They start out white, and then, yes, thank you for that. And then as they get closer to spawning time, they turn color. And in the case of this coral, they become more orange in color, and then they're released through the mouth, the polyp of the coral. So we do this from time to time. It's once a year event. So if we miss it, got to wait till next year. But we're trying to figure out when they spawn, the timing, and if we can reproduce the corals in our aquarium.
That's incredible. And what a great photo to share. And I'm sure a lot of people are surprised to learn that that is how eggs are released through corals. Not something you get to see every day. So thanks for sharing those photos with us, Fern.
Sure.
So I want to dive into some of our questions from those of us joining us live. And we're going to start out with a question from Mike Lavach. Lavach? Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Mike, your last name. But Mike wants to know, how is the skeleton formed?
First of all, hi, Mike. But I didn't hear the whole question.
So Mike is asking, how is the coral skeleton formed?
Oh, how the coral skeleton is formed. So each polyp is able to take calcium carbonate from the water, or I'm sorry, calcium bicarbonate from the water column. And because of there's like a reaction within the polyp, the pH is different and a little bit higher. They can deposit this calcium carbonate, and slowly, little by little, each polyp deposits this calcium carbonate, and little by little, you get this colony growing and creating this larger skeleton. Um, the image that you're seeing now, the video that you're seeing now, is one of our coral farms. So these are fragments of different corals that we've been growing in the back. Thanks, Mike.
So that leads us into sort of a related question in terms of that white skeleton of a coral. Carolyn Mickle, hi Caroline, would you advise that people avoid purchasing coral as decoration for their home for conservation reasons?
Hi, Carolyn. Yeah, we don't want to do that because a lot of those decorations are were live corals that were removed, and it shouldn't be done really. There are companies that make plastic corals, replicas of corals that look just as real, and if you can stick to those, that's what I would do.
Great, thank you. I want to go down to Mary Ramos Duke, and her children, Nolan and Abigail. So Nolan, age 5, and Abigail, age 8. Hi, you guys. Thanks for joining. They would like to know how they can help save coral reefs and keep them nice and healthy.
Yeah, great questions. That's awesome that they want to help. I think, you hear a lot about recycling and reducing our carbon footprint, even though I don't know where those folks live, but even though we live far away from coral reefs, helping in that way, what we can locally does help overall. We're all on the same planet, and everything we do here has an effect somewhere else. So, and then beyond that, maybe when they get a little bit older, they can help volunteer at the Birch Aquarium, for example, or another aquarium. Um, so things like that would be helpful, or supporting an organization that promotes reef conservation would be good too.
Yeah, and on a day like Earth Day, I think it's important for our guests joining in to know that they can make a big positive impact even on a small scale like that. So thanks for sharing, Fern.
That's great. Great questions.
All right, so let's see. Joseph Harder would like to know what accounts for the wild color variation among these corals developing in the same tank?
Okay, so there's a little breakup in the call. So I think you asked, why is there color variation in the corals in the tank?
Yes.
Is that the question? Okay. Okay. So again, corals have that symbiotic algae in their tissue, which gives them this kind of greenish brown color. But then corals also have their own pigments. And so that's why you see some purple, some red, maybe some orange and blues and purples. Um, and that's, you know, each coral, and there could be different colors within a species too. So the same coral species could have different color variations because of those different pigments.
Yeah, I think the amount of colors that corals have are very impressive to people who have never seen coral before. Lots of bright neon colors in some of our exhibits at the aquarium.
Yeah, the color we don't want to see, because that would indicate in most cases that the corals are bleaching, and that's not a healthy condition, and that would be due to warm waters. But yeah, seeing these, like in the video we're watching now, those are healthy corals.
All right, Fern, so we've got time for about 2 more questions. So I'm going to go to Lindsay Root here, is asking a interesting question, which is, what species are the slowest or fastest growing?
Okay, what species is the aquarium growing? Um, I believe at the last count we may have had to 3 species of corals. We also have a number of soft corals. And the way we choose these is we look for diversity of color, size, and shape. We want to create an exhibit that looks as natural as possible. And then also, as I mentioned before, we're hoping that our corals will spawn. So in some of our exhibits, we'll have multiple of the same species so that we can hopefully spawn them and fertilize eggs here at the aquarium. So that basically determines what corals we have on exhibit.
And Fern, of those corals, are there certain species that grow faster or slower than others?
So the ones that are the fastest growing are usually these what are called staghorn corals, like that green one you see in the image right now. Those are a genus of coral, Acropora, and these are probably the fastest growing corals of the stony corals. So those are probably some of the fastest. And then we have some corals like the bubble coral or some fleshy large polyp corals that, or like brain corals that grow much slower. And so we have to be aware of that. So some corals don't grow over and shade others or sting others. So we place them strategically in our exhibits so that there's less chance of that happening. Great question. Hi, Lindsay.
All right, Fern. So I'm going to close out our last question from one of our Birch Aquarium volunteers who is joining in, Sean Kelly. So happy Earth Day, Sean Kelly. And also it's National Volunteer Week. So we're shouting out all of our Birch Aquarium volunteers. So National Volunteer Appreciation Week to you as well, Sean Kelly. He would like to know, and maybe others joining, what is the difference between hard corals and soft corals?
Hi, Sean. So that's exactly the difference. Some are hard and some are soft. So the hard ones actually have a skeleton, that calcium carbonate skeleton. That image you're looking at right now, that's a soft coral. And one way to determine a soft coral from a hard coral, if you don't know them too well, soft corals will flow or will sway back and forth in the water column because they really don't have that calcium carbonate skeleton. Some do have a little bit of pieces of skeleton, but not like a stony coral. Stony corals don't move around. And the image we're looking at right now is a sea, which is a relic, but no skeleton there. So, and you'll see movement. So that's basically the easiest way to tell is by looking at movement. If it doesn't move that much, it's probably a stony coral. And some stony corals have big fleshy polyps, but you look for a skeleton underneath. So hope that answers your question.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Fern, for sharing all of your knowledge on corals. You're definitely our coral expert at the aquarium, and we're so grateful that you took the time today to join us for Earth Day and talk to our guest all about corals and what they can do to help conserve them in the wild. So just thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Delaney. Thanks everyone for watching. Happy Earth Day.
Yeah, happy Earth Day to all of you. And Birch Aquarium has lots of other things happening today to celebrate the 50th anniversary. So make sure to visit our website at aquarium.ucsd.edu. We've got really fun online activities that are easy to do from home. And make sure to give us a shout out on social media to join our Earth Day pledges and how you guys can help make a difference. So thanks so much, everyone. Happy Earth Day. And thank you to Fern for joining us. Thanks, everybody.